Signing up users. In this lesson, we are going to learn how we can build a sign up form in Ionic, and then we'll use Firebase authentication to allow the users to sign up for an account. So here we are back inside Visual Studio Code and we have successfully configured Firebase in this application. So if you go to your app.module.ts file, you can see this configuration right here. So the first step would be to create the sign up form. And to do that, I'll create a new page in the application. So I'll use the Ionic CLI for that. And the command to create a new page will be Ionic generate page followed by the name of the page. In this case, the name of the page is going to be sign up. And there we have our new page. Let's run the development server again. So if you look inside your sign up page, you can see that I have all the files that I need for any page in an Ionic application. And if I refresh the application in the browser, I still get to see the home page. So I'll change this path to sign up and I get to see the sign up page. So now we can go ahead and write the code in signup.page.html file to create the sign up form. So I'll start by changing the title here to create an account, and I'll also change the color of this navigation bar to danger. Inside my Ion content, I'll start by creating an Ion list, and inside this list I'll create an Ion item for the email field and another one for the password field. I'll also define Ion labels for each of these fields, and I'll also set the position of the labels as tagged. The type of the input field for email is going to be email, and I'll also set a placeholder value. If I save this right now, you can see that I get a nice input field where the user can type in their email address. So I'll just go ahead and copy this Ion item and paste it just below it inside our Ion list. This time I'll change the label text to password, and I'll change the type of the input to password as well. You can remove the placeholder for the password, or you can just go ahead and type in anything that you want. Finally, after the Ion list, I'll define a button using the Ion button component. I'll set the expand property to block, and I'll set the color of the button to danger. The text on the button will be sign up. And there we have our sign up form. In a typical application, we'll add more fields. For example, the user's name, phone number, and even a confirm password field. But for now, email and password will do. The last thing that we'll do inside the HTML file is add bindings. So I'll add an ng model and I'll set it equal to a property called email. I'll do the same thing with the password field and I'll set it equal to a property called password. Finally, I'll bind the click event of this button to a function, and let's call this function signup. Now we can go to our signup.page.ts file and create all these properties and this signup function. Let's go ahead and do that. So I'll open my signup.page.ts file, and inside the class, the first thing I'll do is define a property called email, which is of the type string, and another one called password, which will also be of the type string. Now that we have defined these two properties, we can go ahead and create the signup function. Inside the signup function, we'll be using the Firebase SDK to create a new account for the user using this email and password. And for that, we will have to import Firebase first. So at the top, I'll add the import statement for Firebase, import star as Firebase from Firebase. And inside the signup function, we'll start using the Firebase SDK. So I'll just start typing in firebase.auth. And on this auth object, you get a number of functions that you can use to perform various actions using Firebase authentication. For now, we just want to use a function called createUser, with email and password. This function takes in two arguments. The first one is the email and the second one is the password. And we have both the values. So just pass in this .email and this .password to this function, and then you can execute the promise. In the success callback inside your promise, you get an object of type user credential which contains all the information about the user if a user is successfully created on Firebase authentication. Let's call this argument as data, and for now let's just log it to the console. And in case an error occurs, we can handle that using the catch block. For now, we'll log the errors to the console as well. Let's save that. But before we can test this out, we'll have to make a small change in our Firebase console. So head back to your Firebase console, click on Authentication, and select the Sign In Method tab. Here, you can see all the providers that Firebase offers to allow the users to log into your application. And all these providers are disabled by default. We want to use the email password provider for now. So click on it and enable the email password provider. Click on Save. And this should change the status of email password provider to enabled. Once it's enabled, you can go back to your application in the browser and try signing up by inputting an email and a password. Let's try that. I'll also increase the size of the console so that I can see all the logs that I get. I'll enter an email and a small password. And I'll click on the sign up button. And you can see that I get this error in the console, and the error message says password should be at least 6 characters. And this is a requirement that Firebase enforces. So you should be entering a password which is at least 6 characters long. Now if I click on the sign up button, I get a new object logged to the console, and this object contains a user object which contains all the information about the user that has just been created on Firebase. It also contains a property called UID, which is a unique ID that Firebase has allotted to this user. Make a mental note of this UID. If you go back to your Firebase console and have a look at the Users tab in the Authentication section, you can see that a new user has been created with the email s@a.com, and the user's UID is the same one that we saw in the console. So a new user is successfully created using Firebase authentication. From your Firebase console, you can perform various operations on this user. You can disable the account if you want to, or you can even delete the account. You can also send a reset password email to the user's email address, and this will allow the user to reset their password in case they have lost it. So now that we know how we can create new users in our application using Firebase authentication, let's have a look at how we can log users in if they already have an account.